When people ask, "What is the best time for me to retire?" they are often really asking something much deeper beneath the surface. They are really wondering, will I be okay? Will my savings last? Will I finally feel at peace? Will I regret leaving too early? Or even worse, will I regret staying too long? Because retirement is not just a money decision, it is emotional. It is deeply personal. It represents the closing of one chapter of life and the uncertain beginning of another. And after spending decades working, sacrificing, saving, commuting, worrying, and carrying heavy responsibilities on your shoulders, you want reassurance that when you finally step away from your career, you are moving into stability instead of financial uncertainty. But here is something many people do not fully understand. Retirement is not determined only by how much money you saved. It is also influenced by when you choose to retire, and that timing can completely change the result. The exact month you retire can affect your taxes, your Medicare costs, your Social Security benefits, your healthcare expenses, your investment planning, and ultimately, how much of your money actually stays in your pocket over the next 10, 20, or even 30 years. That is why financially wise retirees rarely wake up one morning and say, "I am tired. I am done." They treat retirement strategically. They watch the calendar, they study the numbers, they think years ahead, and they carefully place themselves so they can retire with confidence instead of worry. Unfortunately, many hardworking people do the opposite. Some decide to retire during the holidays because it feels natural. Others leave after a birthday because it seems meaningful. Some step away only because they are drained, burned out, and completely exhausted. And honestly, that feeling makes sense. After years of deadlines, office politics, stress, inflation, rising medical bills, and uncertainty, there eventually comes a point when your mind and body quietly say, "Enough." But emotions alone should never choose your retirement date. Because one badly timed retirement decision can quietly cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And the frustrating part is that most people do not notice the mistake until years later. That is why today we are going beyond the usual retirement conversation. We are talking about the smartest times of year to retire, the biggest mistakes people make when choosing retirement timing, and how to position yourself financially so retirement becomes one of the most rewarding stages of your life instead of one filled with stress and regret. And believe me, this matters far more than most people realize. Because retirement is not simply about ending your career, it is about protecting your future. It is about creating freedom. It is about finally waking up without anxiety pressing down on your chest. It is about being able to enjoy your mornings, your family, your health, your hobbies, your trips, your grandchildren, and your life without constantly worrying whether your money will outlast you. That is the real goal. And timing plays a major role in making that possible. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is retiring at the end of the year. At first glance, leaving work in December sounds perfect. It feels organized, it feels symbolic. You finish the year, walk away from your job, and start January officially retired. Emotionally, that makes a lot of sense. You may even collect year-end bonuses, unused PTO payouts, commissions, or vacation cash-outs. Many people think, why not get one last paycheck before I go? But financially, retiring at the end of the year can create problems most people never expect. Here is why. Imagine this. You already worked almost the entire year. That means you earned a full salary. Maybe you also received bonuses, investment income, dividends, or business earnings throughout the year. Then suddenly, during that same tax year, you start withdrawing from retirement accounts. Maybe you begin receiving pension payments. Maybe you start collecting Social Security. Maybe you roll over your 401k. Maybe you pull money from an IRA to pay living expenses. Now all of those income sources begin stacking on top of each other, and suddenly the IRS sees one thing: an unusually high income year that can push you into a higher tax bracket much faster than expected. And once that happens, the effects can snowball. A larger portion of your Social Security income can become taxable. Your Medicare premiums may rise later because of income-related adjustments. You may lose healthcare subsidies if you are under 65. Capital gains taxes may increase, and your overall retirement plan becomes less efficient right from the beginning. That is what makes this so painful. You spent your entire life building retirement security only to accidentally give more of it back through taxes because of poor timing. And most people never saw it coming. But taxes are not the only issue. Retiring late in the year can also remove strategic opportunities that may have helped you save money for years ahead. For example, many retirees benefit from Roth conversions early in retirement. Why? Because once your employment income disappears, you may temporarily fall into lower tax brackets. That creates a chance to move money from traditional retirement accounts into Roth accounts at lower tax rates. And that matters because Roth money can keep growing tax-free for the rest of your life. But if you work nearly the entire year, your salary may already fill those lower brackets before you even get the chance to use them. In other words, the opportunity disappears. And sometimes delaying retirement by only a few months, or retiring earlier in the year instead, can create dramatically different long-term outcomes. This is why retirement planning is not only about investments. It is about coordination. Everything connects. Taxes, healthcare, Social Security, income timing, withdrawals, Medicare, and spousal planning. A strong retirement plan looks at the whole picture. Now let us talk about healthcare for a moment because this is another area where timing matters a great deal. Many people underestimate how stressful healthcare transitions can become during retirement, especially if they retire suddenly. Let us say someone retires in late December and their employer health coverage ends right after that. Now they are scrambling during the busiest time of year trying to understand when Medicare starts, how COBRA works, whether ACA coverage makes more sense, which deadlines apply, what penalties might happen, and whether they will have gaps in coverage. That is a lot to process during what is supposed to be an exciting life change. And unfortunately, mistakes in healthcare planning can become very expensive. That is why many careful retirees actually prefer retiring earlier in the year or around mid-year instead, because it gives them breathing room. It gives them time to arrange coverage carefully instead of rushing through major decisions under pressure. Now, if we are talking about the smartest times to retire financially, there are usually 3 periods that stand out most clearly. The first is retiring early in the year, usually between January and March. This can be extremely powerful for people focused on tax efficiency. Why? Because your earned income for that year stays relatively low. And that lower income creates opportunities. You may have room to complete Roth conversions at lower rates. You may keep your Social Security taxes lower. You may reduce future Medicare premium increases. You may manage capital gains more strategically and build a cleaner financial foundation for retirement moving forward. Think about it this way. The first year of retirement often sets the tone for everything that comes after it. And if you can begin that chapter with flexibility and lower taxable income, you give yourself more control over the future. That control matters because retirement should not feel like financial survival. It should feel like freedom. Another excellent retirement window is mid-year, around May through July. This approach creates a balanced transition. You still earn part of your annual salary. You may still receive bonuses or benefits, but you avoid many of the year-end tax complications that can show up later. Mid-year retirement also gives people time to mentally adjust to retirement, instead of going from full-speed work mode to complete disengagement overnight. And emotionally, that change is much bigger than most people expect. Many retirees imagine retirement will feel like a permanent vacation. Then, reality arrives. The structure disappears. The routine changes. The identity connected to work slowly fades, and suddenly, uncertainty appears. That is why easing into retirement can actually be healthier emotionally and financially. Mid-year retirement also works especially well for people approaching age 65 because it allows smoother coordination with Medicare enrollment and healthcare planning. Now let us talk about milestone birthdays, because this is another very important factor many people overlook. Certain ages unlock major financial opportunities. Age 59 and a half allows penalty-free access to retirement accounts. Age 62 opens early Social Security eligibility. Age 65 unlocks Medicare. Age 67 may provide full retirement age benefits depending on your birth year. Age 73 begins required minimum distributions for many retirees. These milestones matter because they affect your available options. And retirement planning is ultimately about maximizing options. For example, retiring right after turning 65 may help you coordinate healthcare far more smoothly. Retiring after full retirement age may increase guaranteed Social Security income significantly over time. And waiting even a few more years before claiming Social Security can dramatically raise monthly income for life. That is especially important because many people underestimate longevity today. Retirement is no longer just a 10-year chapter for many Americans. People are living 20, 25, even 30 years in retirement. And that means your decisions today can echo financially for decades. That is why thoughtful planning matters so much. Not because retirement should feel complicated, but because small mistakes today can become very large regrets later. One of the saddest conversations I have with retirees is when someone says, "I wish I understood this sooner," especially when the mistake could have been avoided with proper planning. And unfortunately, there are several retirement mistakes I see again and again. One of the biggest is what I call the tax avalanche. This happens when too many financial events collide in one year. A person works all year, receives bonuses, sells investments, starts pension income, claims Social Security, takes IRA withdrawals, and suddenly their tax return becomes a mess. Not because they did anything wrong, but because nobody coordinated the timing. That is the difference between reacting emotionally and planning strategically. Another major mistake involves Medicare enrollment. This catches people off guard constantly. Some retirees assume Medicare starts automatically. Others misunderstand enrollment windows, and some wait too long because they are still covered through work, only to later discover they misunderstood the rules. The penalties can last for life. Imagine paying permanently higher premiums because of a timing mistake. That is why healthcare planning deserves just as much attention as investment planning. Then there is Social Security. This topic is deeply emotional because many people feel pressure to claim benefits as soon as possible. Sometimes it comes from fear, sometimes from burnout, sometimes because they worry Social Security may not be there later. But claiming benefits early can permanently reduce monthly income by a significant amount. And that lower amount follows you for life. Now, in certain situations, taking Social Security early absolutely makes sense, but it should be a strategic decision, not a panic decision. The timing should align with your taxes, your health, your investments, your longevity expectations, and your spouse's financial future. Which brings us to another huge mistake: failing to coordinate retirement as a couple. Retirement planning changes a lot when two people are involved. One spouse may still be working. One may claim Social Security earlier. Healthcare coverage may depend on one employer plan. Tax brackets may shift. Survivor benefits become important. Required distributions may affect household taxes later. Everything becomes connected. And when couples fail to coordinate their retirement timing together, unnecessary financial stress often follows. But here is the encouraging truth. Most retirement mistakes are preventable. That is the good part. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need millions of dollars. You do not need to understand every line of the tax code. You simply need a thoughtful plan, a strategy, and a clear understanding of how the decisions you make today affect your future tomorrow. Because retirement should feel empowering, not frightening. You spent decades working for your future. You sacrificed weekends. You endured stressful jobs. You pushed through uncertainty. You carried responsibilities. You saved when money was tight. You kept moving forward even during difficult seasons. And now, you deserve a retirement built on confidence instead of confusion. You deserve mornings without alarm clocks and evenings without financial anxiety. You deserve the freedom to enjoy your life instead of constantly worrying about market swings, taxes, or unexpected expenses. But that kind of retirement rarely happens by accident. It happens through preparation. It happens through intentional decisions. And sometimes it happens simply because someone took the time to choose the right retirement date instead of rushing into the wrong one. That is why retirement planning is not only about numbers on a spreadsheet. It is about carefully designing the next chapter of your life. Because retirement is not the ending. For many people, it becomes the first time in decades they finally get to live life on their own terms. And honestly, that chapter should begin from a position of strength, not stress, not panic, not confusion. strength. So if you are approaching retirement, or even thinking about it within the next 5 to 10 years, do not just ask yourself, when do I want to retire? Ask yourself, when does it make the most financial sense for me to retire? Because those two answers are not always the same. And sometimes adjusting your timing by even a few months can completely transform your financial future. The goal is not simply to retire as quickly as possible. The goal is to retire wisely, to retire confidently, to retire knowing your money, your healthcare, your taxes, and your income strategy are working together instead of against you. Because once retirement begins, you want to spend your time enjoying life, not fixing avoidable financial mistakes. And the good news is that with the right planning, you absolutely can create that future. A future where retirement feels peaceful, steady, intentional, and deeply rewarding. Not because you got lucky, but because you planned carefully before making one of the biggest decisions of your own.